My Lords, I must begin with an apology. Being new to your Lordship's House, there was an error in processing my request to speak, though I'm grateful to the whips for permission to interject at this point. It's a privilege to have been part of the debate, and I look forward to following this bill through and benefiting from the collective wisdom here. I believe I'm among a relatively few in the House who have experience of both sides of the asylum and refugee system, having first come to this country as a refugee from Iran in 1980. The plight of those fleeing violence and persecution and the difficulties in navigating identity and finding a new home are not abstract or intellectual propositions for me, but part of who I am. And it's with that perspective that I offer some thoughts now. Often I see asylum seekers presented either as victims who require help but have no agency, or as chancers seeking to abuse generosity, criminals even. Neither approach is helpful. How different discussions might be if we reframe to the debate in terms of the best way to work with potential future citizens, neighbours and friends. Not every asylum seeker will meet the criteria for being a refugee, but many will, and they'll become part of our nation and communities. How we treat them in the process has consequences for the sort of society we're creating, the kind of nation we want to be. We've heard it said repeatedly that citizenship is a privilege, not a right. I dispute the binary nature of the claim, but I agree that citizenship and other statuses require a need for people to belong and contribute. Belonging can be fostered by welcome and how asylum seekers are received, but it also relies on there being real opportunities to contribute. A system that respects human dignity, encourages agency rather than victimhood, gives people a chance to be heard and contribute, is a system that will foster healthy communities and build up future citizens. In Chelmsford Diocese, we're proud of our work with refugees, and we've played a leading role in community sponsorship. We believe civil society needs to play its part in the welcome and building up of neighbours. I hope to hear more from the Minister on community sponsorship schemes, but I also want to make the point that that is never enough. We need a policy framework that gives future citizens the chance to contribute in meaningful ways. The opportunity to work, particularly for those facing long delays in the asylum process, would be one such chance, but is sadly absent from the bill. Indeed, there is much in the bill that doesn't meet the tests of providing for agency, dignity, and a chance to be heard. I'm concerned that the provision to remove citizenship without notice is a denial of the right to be heard, and one that has wider implications that seem to be unacknowledged. I'm concerned too that the proposed differential treatment of refugees, depending on how they've arrived, is an example of learning the wrong lessons from the hostile environment, and I'll be listening carefully to proposed amendments in that space. I've spoken to a great many people over the years, and am yet to find the asylum seeker who was deterred from coming to the UK because they're barred from working or housed in substandard accommodation. The situations from which people flee and the promise of hope and a new life greatly outweigh any deterrent. And yet these hardships are real, and they serve as barriers to contribution and to fostering a sense of belonging. No one disputes the challenges facing the asylum system, but I'm deeply troubled by some of the implications of this bill. I'm not clear what problems differentiated treatment or deterrence policies will solve, and I fear that aspects put in jeopardy the agency and dignity of many vulnerable people. In conclusion, if you will indulge a bishop a biblical reference, St. Paul writes in his letter to the Hebrews, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." My Lords, it is better for the soul of this nation and for creating good future citizens to treat people with the greatest possible respect and dignity rather than with hostility and doubt.